Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. Tonight's learning is in the merit of all the Jewish people, wherever they may be, especially in the land of Israel, especially the soldiers in the front lines and those who are held hostage. They should all have protection and freedom and success and everything. Okay. If you would like to sponsor a class, let us know. Classes are open for sponsorship. All right. So we're going to study a little different today. This Shabbos is Yud Shvat, the 10th day of Shvat. It's a very special day on the Chabad Hasidic calendar. It is the yard site of the previous Rabbi in 1950. The previous Rabbi passed away. It was also on Shabbos, Yud Shvat. And it was consequently also the day that the Rebbe became the leader of the Chabad movement, officially accepting the position 1 year later on the first yard site. But obviously, as soon as the previous Rebbe passed away, the mantle of leadership passed to him. In 1951, at the Yud Shvat yard site, the Rebbe said a Maimer, a Hasidic discourse that we're going to explore tonight. This Hasidic discourse is pivotal in the Rebbe's leadership, and really he lays out the mission of our generation, the mission of the Chabad movement, and in more general sense of the Jewish people of this generation, of this American post-Holocaust generation. So the Maimer, this Hasidic discourse that the Rebbe spoke about, was actually the Maimer that the previous Rebbe had given out for the Shabbos that ended up being the day of his passing. It was supposed to be, it was going to be, obviously they didn't know at the time it was going to be the Shabbos of his passing, but it was printed in honor of that Shabbos, and it was given out to all the Hasidim. And the Rebbe later explained that this obviously must have been the will, the last will and testament of the previous Rebbe, the fact that it was the last Torah teaching that he gave out. And the Rebbe used this Hasidic discourse. He would repeat it every year. He would repeat it, and there were 20 chapters to this discourse, and over 20 years he would go over every week every year another chapter, and he did this for 20 years, and then he did it again for another about 18 years, going over every year a chapter. So with this, today we're going to discuss the original Hasidic discourse that the Rebbe spoke about. Now, in the previous Rebbe's discourse starts with a verse in Shir Hashirim, the Song of Songs by King Solomon. It's kind of a love song, if you want to say, between God and the Jewish people. So the verse is as follows: Basi legani achaisi kala, I have come to my garden, my sister, my bride. And the commentaries on this verse explain that this is referring to the coming to my garden. What does it mean, my garden? It doesn't say the garden. So the commentators explain that it means legan. It doesn't say a garden, but it says my garden. So in other words, that it was the place where the place where he was originally, right? That in order for it to be my garden, it has to be somewhere where he is comfortable. It says in his natural habitat, I guess you would say in English. And in the case of God, we're saying that God is asking us to bring karbanos. He's asking us to bring sacrifices. So he says to my garden means that the world is really God's original place. So what does it mean that the world was really God's original place? So the Medrash explains on this verse as follows: that God was here in this world in a revealed manner. And then Adam came and he sinned. He pushed God out of this world, right? And then every additional sin that happened in every generation for 7 generations pushed God a little more out of this world to another level out of this world. So 7 sins, 7 levels out of this world. And the different sins are Adam. You have Cain, right? The first murder in the history of the world. Cain kills his brother. You have, or Cain and Abel, as I say in English. Enosh, the world started to worship idols. You have the generation of the flood. We have the generation of the the Mabul of I'm sorry, after the flood is the generation of the Tower of Babel, right? That they built a tower to rebel against God. You have the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah of making charity and generosity illegal in their places. I'm not going to go through every single one in detail, just to give you a general overview. The other one and the last one was the sin of Egypt, that they took Sarah captive, and following that, we have the seven. We have the seven. The Medrash tells us after that there were 7 people who came and brought the um, the Shekhinah, the divine presence, back to this world. Who are the 7? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Levi, Kehas, Amram, and Moshe. Moshe is the final one. Moses finally brings the Shekhinah, the divine presence, back to this world. So we see here that it's not just that so the Rebbe brings out that it says in the previous Rebbe's discourse that all sevenths are beloved. That is so that's the first detail that the Rebbe explains about this idea, that all sevenths are beloved, and that's why Moses, because he was the 7th, that is why the Shekhinah was merited to come specifically down into this world, back into this world, is through him. Oh, there's no sound? Hold on 1 second. Just make sure there's some sound. We're in a new spot today, so I hope it works. How about now? Is any sound? We get a thumbs up if there's some sound coming through. Okay. Yeah, I think it's just you, because everyone else says they hear. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Technical difficulties. We'll post. We always post the class again later, and it's also on YouTube. You can also watch that as well later. And apologize if the sound isn't coming through well. Okay. So all sevenths are beloved. So let's talk about that a little bit. Okay. So we say, how do we know that all sevenths are beloved? So the Medrash explains what it means. Oh, thank you for telling me. Yeah. Okay. Everyone else seems to be hearing just fine. Okay. So what does it mean all sevenths are beloved? So the Medrash tells us as follows. We see that all sevenths are beloved, that the 7th generation of the world was Chanoch. And it says, Vayis halech Chanoch es ha'elokim, that Chanoch walked with God. We see also the 7th of the forefathers were beloved, and this is what we're referring to, is that Moses is the one who goes up to the mountain to get the Torah. Okay, that's another 7th that's beloved. We see the children of the 7th are beloved. King David was the 7th of his family, and he's the chosen one of all his brothers to be the king and to make the Davidic dynasty. He was the 7th child. We see also when it comes to years, the 7th year is beloved, and that is the year of Shemitah, the sabbatical year that we don't work the land in the land of Israel. And as well, we see in the 7th day, right? We have Shabbos. It's on the 7th day. It says, by God bless the 7th day. And with months, the 7th month is the month of Tishrei, and the month of Tishrei is blessed. So we see here that this idea of all sevenths are beloved. Now, what does it mean that all sevenths are beloved? It doesn't say that all beloveds are 7. It's not what it says. It says that all sevenths are beloved. In other words, the reason they're beloved is because it's 7. Now, seemingly, that is something that is not by choice. You can't choose when a person is born, what generation they're born in, or what number child you are, or what day of the week you are. You can't choose any of these things. But we see that for whatever reason, this is a special quality in the fact that they're 7. And that is why Moses got the Torah. In other words, it wasn't his own merit. It was the merit that he's 7. Now, what does it mean 7? 7 comes, there has to be a 1. So who's 1? So let's take a step back. Before we get to 7, what is 1? 1 is Abraham. What was Abraham's mission? And what that Moses completes by being the 7th of that cycle? The 1 is Abraham. Abraham his thing was to call out to God. We discussed this a little bit. We discussed this a little bit last week. This idea of interpreting the verse different ways. So it says, "Vayikra Avram." I'll read the verse inside, so I don't make it up. Vayikra Sham b'Shem Hashem. That Abraham called there in the name of God. Kel Olam, the God of the world. So the Talmud tells us, Al Tikra Vayikra Ela Vayakre. Don't read it that he called, rather he made others to call. So Abraham changed the world, and he started telling people about God. He started off his young career as a salesman in his father's idol shop. His father sold idols for a living. Right? We talk about this by the Haggadah. Right? The Jewish people, where are we coming from? Humble beginnings. Our forefather Terach was not a great guy, just a simple idol worshiper, and he sold idols. And Abraham told a customer that his customer gave an offering to these idols, and he smashed all the idols, and he put the hammer in one idol's hand, and he says that they started fighting over this offering. And he said, "What do you mean? How can you say that?" So they bring him to Nimrod, to the king of that area. I think he ruled the world at some point, or a large portion of the world, a very strong, militant ruler, and he has this whole conversation with Abraham. The Medrash tells us that, saying, who rules the world? So he's, is it the sun, the moon, the stars? So every single one has a reason, right? And this one blows away this one, and this one could knock out this one. So he says, well, I worship fire. That's what Nimrod tells Abraham, and he throws him into the fiery furnace, and Abraham survives. So Abraham sort of beat his God, right? And Abraham really brought this into the world. So what is, not only he brought it into the world, he brought it in a way of sacrifice, right? He sacrificed himself. He was willing to be thrown into a fiery furnace in order to show that God is the king of the world. God is the ruler and of the world. And he did this in a way of, this is just what I had to do. Abraham wasn't looking for any greatness. He wasn't looking for martyrdom. It wasn't his goal. His goal was to teach about godliness. And this is what Moses completed. And by bringing the Torah into the world, he completed this idea of bringing God back into the world. This was the thing that he brought, that Moses completed. Now, like we said, this idea that the seventh is completing something of the first, and it's not by choice. You can't choose to be the seventh. Nevertheless, person should realize that it's even though he didn't choose this, and it's not based on his own merit necessarily, but he has the given powers of the previous generations, and that was given to him. And by that being given to him, he's able to go forward and using those powers that he inherited. So in other words, the seventh, I guess to say in this context, the seventh is the seventh because of the other six, right? So even though that the seventh didn't choose to be the seventh, but the seventh has the power of the seventh because of the other six. So in the context of the Rebbe's first address to as being the leader of the Chabad movement, the Rebbe was the seventh leader. That we are the seventh generation from the first Chabad Rebbe of the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. So what was the purpose of that? Was to bring Mashiach. The purpose of the Hasidic movement is to bring godliness into this world, and therefore our job as the seventh generation is actually to make it happen. Is to bring Mashiach. Now, how is it possible? How can we say that are we as great as the previous generations? Absolutely not. Did we choose this? Absolutely not. But they gave us the power to actually do it. And because of we're standing on their shoulders, we have the ability, not by our choice, not because we wanted it, but we have the ability to actually bring God into this world by spreading the message of Judaism. And the last thing that the Rebbe explained in this address is that in other words, so now we kind of know what the mission is, right? The mission is we have to bring the Shekhinah, bring the divine presence, bring Mashiach into this world. So the Rebbe brings last part of the previous Rebbe's last address. In his first address, he brings a story about a rabbi in the Talmud. There was a rabbi, his name was Yehuda Bar Eloi, that he would take a myrtle branch and dance before a bride. And his colleague, Rabbi Shmuel Bar Yitzchak, he would juggle these myrtle branches in front of a bride, right? So in other words, he would make merry at a wedding. So Rabbi Zera said that this rabbi is embarrassing us, right? He's making a fool out of the rabbis. He's being frivolous. So what happened was, when Rabbi Shmuel Bar Yitzchak passed away, a pillar of fire came and separated his coffin from the crowd. And Rabbi Zera said, his folly was effective. And essentially, this idea of folly being used for good, stupidity, craziness, however you want to translate it, is that using in other words, being extreme about something is not always a bad thing, right? Being extreme about bad things, obviously that is what leads a person astray, is, addiction. You could use that as an example. Addiction is a not really rational thing. It doesn't make sense why a person is attracted to a certain vice, but they get so enwrapped that they do crazy things for that vice. And what Rabbi Shmuel Bar Yitzchak did by juggling, which was extreme for his stature of a great person, that brought he went out of his box, and that made him special. That actually brought down this pillar of fire at his funeral to show that he had done something really tremendous by bringing godliness into this world. In that case, by making a bride happy. So in other words, if we go out of our box for Judaism, that's the last step. The last step to bring Mashiach, and the Rebbe talked about how all the Chabad Rebbes did this in their own, and he brought many stories of the Rebbe himself going out of his box to bring Judaism to someone else. One story that the Rebbe, I'll just say quickly, that the Rebbe spoke about at that address was that the first Rebbe of Chabad, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, it was one Yom Kippur, and there was a new mother on the edge of town, and everyone had abandoned her and to go to shul for Yom Kippur, the night of Yom Kippur, and everyone's waiting. Where's the Rebbe? Where is he? And he had gone to the edge of town, and he had chopped some wood and made her a soup and fed her. Simple thing. He fed this woman that everyone else had abandoned to go to shul for Yom Kippur. And so, in other words, that was something out of his box, something that his stature. He could have told one of his aides or one of his followers, say, listen, there's a lady on the edge of town. We can't abandon her. She just gave birth a few days ago. It's important to take care of her. And they would have done it. I'm sure that somebody would have taken care of it. But he went out of his box and he did something crazy, if you want to use that word, something foolish. And by that, we see that this is the kind of thing that we are required in our generation. And that was something that the Alter Rebbe started, and using that story, and obviously many other things that all the Chabad Rebbes taught us, is that we can't just be satisfied and being, Jewish in our homes and in ways that are simple. Okay, this is how we always did things. But now we're in a new generation, and this generation, we have our mission. We know our mission is to bring Mashiach. And because our mission is to bring Mashiach and to finish the job of all the other generations before us. And again, we didn't choose this. This isn't something that we're going to run around and, wow, we're so special. We're not special. We're just regular guys, and we happen to be, this is our generation. For whatever reason, God chose us. And how are we going to do it? By going out of our box, by going out of ourselves and doing things. And through that, we can take the sheker, the falseness of the world, and we can change it to the word sheker, which means falseness of the world, could also mean, has the same letters as kesher, as connection. And eventually we could take it even further, connecting ourselves to God through the same folly of the world. We could use it instead, this folly, this extremism, we could use it in a positive way. And we could eventually use it to turn it into keresh, which are the beams that the Torah talks about that were in the Mishkan. So in other words, to make a home for God. So we could take that folly of the world, and instead of you saying and shunning it and saying, that like the rabbis in the Talmud that said, this rabbi who's going extreme and is juggling, he's crazy. That's one way. But then we saw that really that extreme of helping another person, of bringing just joy to somebody else, that is what set him apart. So now that this special day of the 10th of Shvat, of the anniversary of the previous Rebbe's passing and the assumption of leadership of the Rebbe, we should take this to heart. Find the things in our life that for whatever reason might be difficult. We go out of our box to bring joy to another Jew, to do another mitzvah, to things that might not be easy. It might be a little crazy, but if we do it correctly, this is how we will bring Mashiach. Wishing everybody a good Shabbos, and God willing, we will see you next week.